Hey guys, Vincent here, and in this video we're going to be replacing a normal light switch. And normal light switches, sometimes they don't necessarily work as well as you expect them to, or you're changing color or whatever. So changing these is pretty straightforward. And the tools that you'll need to do it will be first a voltmeter checker, and what this will do is ensure your safety during this whole process. You don't accidentally shock yourself. The way these things work is that you will hold down this button depending on the model, and if it starts flashing a bunch of times and beeping at you, it means it's currently a live circuit, and so you should go turn off the breaker before touching anything. And if it only beeps once, like if I'm checking if this door is electric, it only beep once, just to let you know that it is on and working. You'll also need a replacement switch. The basic switches have these two brass leads right here, and then a ground wire right here. This is not a three-way switch. Three-way switches will have an additional black screw potentially right here. So a normal two-way switch, and it should be a little bit cheaper than the three-way switch, looks like this. You will need a flathead screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver, as well as potentially a new faceplate if you're changing colors. And then I highly recommend using needle nose pliers as well. This really helps put in hooks into your wires, which helps screw them onto these two brass leads on your new switch. And then you might also want to have some real wire cutters so that you can strip these wires to expose new copper if you want to as well. So with all the right tools and the switch, the first thing you're going to be doing is actually turning off the power. And so the way I like to check this is we'll flip on the switch just so that we know that the light should be on, and then we're going to go up to our circuit breaker and then turn off what we think is the right circuit, because you'll potentially have many. And then we'll just make sure that this light is off when we come back down, and then we'll double check with our voltmeter after we start taking this apart that there is no current running through these walls while we're working on it. Circuit breakers look like this. There might be different designs, but usually there's a little metal cover that just comes off like this, and then you can see visually, hopefully someone's labeled what each one of these breakers does. In the case of what we're doing, it's in the downstairs, so I'm going to flip off this breaker for the downstairs lights, and then we'll go back downstairs, check if our light is off. If it is off, then we'll start taking off the faceplate and double checking the voltage. And so as we can see, the light is off, and we can just double check that flipping the switch doesn't make the light come on. So with that out of the way, now we'll get out our flathead screwdriver, take off these two screws to get the faceplate off, and then we'll actually take the switch out and we'll cut to that scene now. Okay, now with your faceplate off, you're going to take out your volt checker, and what you will do is you'll touch the tip of this thing to the ends of the brass leads that you can see in here. As we can see, the meter does not start flashing rapidly, which indicates that these wires do not have any current currently running through them. And you can just check the ground wire too if you want to be really safe. So we've verified now that the light doesn't turn on, and we've double checked that there's no AC current running through these walls right now. We can actually begin to take out this switch, and it's usually as simple as just these two Phillips screwdrivers, which I'll do off camera. After you take out these two Phillips screwdrivers, we will pull this out. Once we've pulled it out, we will remove these two leads, unscrew these two brass screws and our ground wire, and we'll get to that scene now. So after you've removed these two Phillips screwdrivers, you pull it out, and you might get some resistance from all these wires. But now what we're going to be doing is unscrewing these two screws, and I should do this with two hands. Anyways, so we just unscrew these, and then if you have this type of switch, if you have another type of switch where the wires are just directly pushed into this thing, you loosen the two flathead screwdrivers and you try to pull it out. For some reason I always have a really hard time with those, and I just end up cutting them with my wire cutter, which is the reason why I suggested you might use one. But basically what you'll do here is you will take these two leads off, and I'm gonna do this with off camera or not. These wires come out like this. They've got usually little hooks in them to keep holding them in place. And then you'll just orient your new switch like so. The directionality, and by directionality I mean which way is up and down on this thing, matters. Off should be looking like this with a flip switch down, and you just want to make sure that when you screw this in, you're not screwing it in upside down, because that can be a little irritating sometimes. So now that you have your new switch and you have your leads exposed, it is very simply a case of just taking these leads, screwing them onto the appropriate brass screws. Order does not matter in this case, because with these two black wires, all you're doing is connecting them together. So it doesn't matter if the top black wire here goes to here or here. You can put them in either order you want. The only thing that you can't do is put your ground wire where one of these brass screws is. Your ground wire should go on this little green screw right here. Your ground wire may be green, or it might have a little green shielding on it. It doesn't need that shielding, it's just bare copper. But you'll put your ground wire where your little green screw is for your new switch. And then once you've put these back on fully, you'll push everything back into there. You'll screw with your Phillips screwdriver this into place, and then you'll put your faceplate on top of that. And then you can turn the power back on and check if your wiring has been done correctly. Once you've exposed all of your wires, what I recommend using are needle pliers if you're having difficulty getting the wires off of the old switch. The other thing I recommend doing is, depending on the orientation of your switch, note how we have these two brass leads will be on the right side of this switch. If that is the case, and your switch is going to look like this, because up is the on position, off is the down position. These two brass leads, I highly recommend putting hooks in them and making sure that the hooks align with the same direction that you will be rotating clockwise this screw down, so that as you are rotating this down, your screw is helping grab onto the copper wire and give you a really solid connection onto your new switch, so you don't have to come back in and do this again. So use those needle nose pliers in order to get the hooks in the right direction. You want them, if it's on the right side of this, we're going to want them hooked up like they are here. And then because we have our ground wire on the left side of our switch, I have the hook pointing down, so that as I torque down, as I rotate clockwise this green screw, it is helping grab onto that copper wire and really give us a solid connection with this switch. So once you've done that, you'll screw all these down, you'll push everything back into the wall, and then screw down these two screws back into the box, and then you'll put your faceplate back on, and then you'll check if your light is working to verify that you've done a good job. Okay, once you've torqued down your wires, you've got your hook direction correct, so you know you've got a solid, nice connection. You just push everything back in, and it might get a little fussy, but just do your best. Push it in, and then make sure to torque down the two screws that hold the switch in place. And you do want it to sit pretty flush to the wall. You don't need to torque down these screws way too much. And then also I recommend kind of torquing them down, not entirely, just so you do it in steps. So like you torque down the top screw, then the bottom screw a little bit, and you just kind of work its way down. And then once you've got it to this point, what you can do is double check you've got the directionality. So down is off, which is correct, on is up. And we're going to go back to our circuit breaker now. I do have a new faceplate as well to make the color match on this. So we're going to check that. The power is still off, so we're going to turn the power back on, make sure this light works, put our faceplate back in, and then come back. Okay, and so after we've switched the power back on and put our faceplate back in, turning on the light, what we can see here is that we now have lights, and replacing switches is pretty easy and something that I strongly encourage people to do. I know there are a lot of risks involved, but once you know how to turn off power through your circuit breaker, you should be good. And also double checking the electricals within your house is something that is, I think, is a very good safety thing to do, just to make sure that you don't have any potential electrical fire hazards. And so replace this switch, and I hope this video helps. Thank you for watching.